Okay, the first thing I noticed was that in a very remiss manner, I've only named myself on the front slide. So also Lawrence, stick your hand in the air, Lawrence Northwell, my colleague in East Kent, but I have actually included him in a low tide trail that we did in he did in Ramsden, came in the air. The Lawrence gave in Ramsden, which was brilliant a couple of weeks ago. So East Kent Coast Discovery Programme runs all the way around from Conya Creek round to Dungeness. I managed to capture most of the East Kent coast in planning that one. But it also means we've got some really interesting, we've got estuary at the top, then we've got chalk cliffs, huge expanses of shingle, and so like a really, really varied coastline. We've mostly been working in Thanet and just down in Dover for the beginning of the project this time round. And we've been working on 3 sites: Pegwell Bay, Hoverport, which I'm going to talk about today, Stoneleys Nature Reserve, which is a mostly Second World War site, which is a super interesting site as well, and Sandwich Bay with the Nautical Archaeology Society, which Peter, she can wave a hand in the air, is going to tell you all about this afternoon. That's also a super interesting site. So yes, I'm going completely to the other end of the archaeological spectrum than Oliver's talk just now, with a much later historical site, historical archaeology site, which is interesting on many levels. So this is Pegwell Bay, Hoverport, near just south of Ramsgate. It was constructed in 1968 on shale waste from Chislett Colliery, which is about 10 miles from the bay. In the words of this film, it says a fleet of 100 lorries is carrying away over 250,000 tonnes of black shale, disposing of an unsightly tip and improving the local amenities. It was opened in 1969 by Prince Philip. It cost £1.5 million, and they were predicting 4,000 crossings a year. That's what they planned, with the service to run hourly in the summer. We had the opportunity, or the really great luck, to meet one of the hover pilots last week on fieldwork in Sandwich Bay, and he said they did achieve that, and I think they were doing hourly crossings in the summer, so he would go backwards and forwards. This film actually is really worth catching on British Pathway, not least because it just says that Prince Philip was allowed a little go at the controls of the hovercraft. But they don't show that bit. So it's also well worth watching for its terribly, terribly clipped BBC accent, which starts, Ramsgate, the new hopping off point for Europe, while the Channel Tunnel still seems to be a long way off. Air and surface routes are rapidly opening up, and Europe gets a whole lot closer. But when it did open, the Hoverloid, the operator, had been in really fierce competition with Dover's Hoverspeed since they started operations. Hoverloid started operations in '68, actually from Ramsgate Harbour, and this was their new purpose-built port from '69. So their new purpose-built hoverport, the one that we're looking at archaeologically, gave them the competitive edge over Hoverspeed. But it's also they really played up the glamorous elements of the travel. With Mrs. Wilson, wife of Howard Wilson, launched one of their craft. So it had this complete connection with like the white heat of technology, post-war white heat of technology materialised. You had pilots in charge of the flights across the channel, and your white-gloved, mini-skirted, beautifully pom-pom-hatted stewardesses catered for all the passengers' needs, and they were given lessons in how to do their makeup as well, apparently. You could get souvenirs of your voyage, like this lovely leather wallet that was donated to me by an East Kent Coast Discovery Programme volunteer, and also buy these postcards. So with all this technology, the hoverport only lasted 13 years. It was quite greatly affected by the oil crisis of the 70s. Slower but larger capacity ferries were taking a lot of the road transport. They could only carry about 30 vehicles, hovercraft. And it quickly became clear that the only way that cross-channel hovercraft operations could continue was by amalgamating Hoverspeed down at Dover and Hoverloid. So the fleets were rationalised and the companies merged in 1981. And from after the summer season in 1982, Pegwell Bay stopped operations completely. And then for 2 years, the Hoverport was just empty until 1984, 1985, when the buildings were used to house policing the Kent miners during the miners' strike. So I think there's a huge sort of irony and sandwich of the site there that it was built on coal shale, and effectively the miners' strike destroyed it, or not the miners' strike, was the end of the Kent coal industry. The site today is a haven for dog walkers. It's easily accessible. It's got a lovely cafe open in the summer and toilets up by the Viking ship. There's the Viking ship. It's worth a visit. It's not really a Viking ship. You can see there's probably activities going on in the evening. I don't know if you can all see, but there's a fire pit down at the bottom. There's quite a few of those on the site. Beer cans, food wrappers. So he's suggesting social gatherings. I'm fairly certain there must have been illegal raves there in the 80s and 90s. Haven't found any proof, but we'll get there. We'll find that proof. And go-karters have used the site, and that's what these tyres are for. And we saw this poster when we were there, so I took a photograph, and at the time I just thought, oh, it's preppers, people who prepare for like oncoming doom. I did think the logo does look slightly fashion, but maybe just a bit all right. But I actually I researched this just yesterday. I found this is actually an awful lot more disturbing than I first thought. The base is a neo-Nazi social network with paramilitary intent, like actually frighteningly horrible. Didn't want to go too far down the internet on that one, but I think it's really, it really shows how this site, now it's become semi-wild, is being used by loads of different people for loads of different purposes. And that does bring me to other than human interaction on the site. This is a beaver that the CEO of East Kent Mencap spotted on the site, and he went to the council and said, "I've seen a beaver on the site." I went, "Oh, I think you mean an otter." I went, "No, I think you mean a beaver." Really. Unfortunately, it didn't live very long. It was probably an escapee from a local zoo. Then, in the centre of the site, you still have this big row of formerly planted leylandii, but it's being overtaken by birch. There's about 10 species of orchid there. There's buddleia. There's this lovely pink frothy plant, which questions at the end. Can someone tell me what it is? Who knows about plants in the audience? Because I want one in my garden. And of course, one of the huge things affecting the site, other than human interaction on the site, is of course the sea. The power of which is amplified, of course, by climate change effects. The very high tides late last autumn, and this was taken a couple of weeks ago when Lawrence and I and one of our volunteers, Tiana, who's also in the audience, and he's not going to move because he's really shy, walked down to the site. And you can see the apron has become completely flooded, and this has been happening since last year. And it's contributing to the fracturing of the concrete. And the fracture of the concrete has caused a problem because, as I said, it's built on coal shale, so it is technically contaminated land. And one of the really serious problems why it's contaminated land, because you can see from this DEFRA magic map that it's surrounded on all three sides by the North East Kent Marine Protection Area, Sandwich and Pegwell Bay National Nature Reserve, Thanet Coast and Sandwich Ramsar Site, Sandwich Bay to Hackling Marshes Site of Specific Scientific Interest, Sandwich Bay Special Area of Conservation, Thanet Coast and Sandwich Bay Special Protection Area, and this drinking water protected area for the River Stour. So it creates some really, really interesting landscape conflicts. But it's also ensured the Hoverport's survival as a site, because it's very, very difficult to develop, because it's contaminated and because it's so surrounded by such highly protected land. And of course, so any work there in that area calls on managing really, really good relationships with those who manage and care for the natural heritage in that area, such as the Marine Officer for Thanet District Council and his Coastal Wardens, Kent Wildlife Trust, and so on. So what have we actually been up to there? This was a trip we made in September 2019. Louisa Grabovi of Ramsgate Heritage Action Zone put me in touch with East Kent Mencap's photography group, who they normally go out and photograph on nature reserves. They photograph a lot of natural features, birds, all sorts of stuff, but they'd never really been to a site, an archaeological site before, or a built heritage site. So we went down to the Hoverport, and the weather was vile. The weather was actually properly vile. I don't have a film like Oliver's. It wasn't that high wind, but it was heaving with rain. But their enthusiasm was completely dim. I did actually phone to see if they wanted to cancel beforehand because it was so bad. And I'm like, no, You want to go? Yes, proper archaeology. So our work there really took the form of a sort of a random sample survey, condition survey of the site, and also to see how the site had changed from other photographs that we could find on the internet. I think their photographs though also show how completely impossible it is when you have a site like this to separate the cultural heritage from the natural heritage. They're completely entwined. So I'm just going to show you some of their photographs. So this is Sarah's sort of expansive photograph of the site. You can see the walkway that pedestrians used to access the site. That's completely blocked off now. You can still see the white lining and bollards marking the roads, but you've also got fennel growing, a dead rabbit, which I'm not sure was spotted, and evidence of the dog walkers in a left dog poo bag. We've got Robert's photograph. It really sums up well how nature is beginning to tip the balance of the site with the roots of the buddleia. Buddleia obviously is a super butterfly-friendly plant, but the roots are cracking the tarmac surfaces. And one of Michael's, which shows well the just the expanse of sea that comes in and hits the site. And then we've got Lee's view from one port to another. So this is looking towards Ramsgate Harbour. And he's captured really well. It's a bit blurry, but to be honest, I'm surprised he actually got any good photos. The amount of rain that was on people's lenses by the end of the day. And this you can see the really fragile coastline with this wind-blown low S. And these cliffs are also part of triple SI because it's a very rare environment with the low S. And I think it was Lee, for me, who summed up the site perfectly in the best words possible. Oops, wrong way. When he said it was weird but interesting. I think all archaeology should be weird but interesting. I actually t-shirts make archaeology weird and interesting again. So the week's work, this was back in September, but our week's work culminated in a week-long show at Nice Things Gallery in Ramsgate, which is why Lawrence was doing walks in Ramsgate at the same time, which we did from the gallery to bring people who like CITiZAN into the gallery, but people who wanted to go to the gallery out with CITiZAN, which works in a really nice relationship. So this was gallery just as we'd set all the images up. This was just before we left the night before, and then photographs from the opening, which it was really good. It's a really nice space, and it was up for a week. And we had some lovely comments about fab images of a magical place. And it is magical, the Hoverport. Some of you might be dubious about its magical nature, but it is a very special place. And the mayor came to see us as well, which was brilliant. And she's actually apparently wearing the most valuable mayor's chain in the whole of the UK. And she has a minder, which I didn't know. It was like this. I wanted him to have like one of those curly ear pieces, but he didn't. But anyway. So, yeah, it's been absolutely brilliant to work with East Kent Mencap on this site, and we're planning further work at the site and around the site. The exhibition is going to be shown again at Sandwich Bay Bird Observatory when we return there with the NAS in March, and we're going to have some, I think the idea is to have some planned talks in the evening where we talk about the archaeology and the Bird Observatory talk about bird species. And in April, we're going back to the site, us and the East Kent Mencap photographers, and the idea is to go back each season, take more photographs, and carry on documenting the site and seeing how it changes through the seasons. We've also been talking about a collaboration with Canterbury Christchurch University between their students, East Kent Mencap and CITiZAN, and we're keeping close contact with the marine officer and his coastal wardens about the site. Again, potentially with a view to doing some kind of collaboration. So, just to sum up, it's a really, really interesting site, and you could explore it from so many angles, from the politics, local politics, to, and I think probably one of the most interesting things about the site is how closely the natural heritage and the cultural heritage of that site are completely entangled. You can't separate them because they're feeding into each other all the time. And that's it. Lots of collaborations, and thank you to these fantastic people.